Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for USports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics, bringing you the Week 4 preview. We're going to start off with what I think might be a very fiery conversation about the new USports Top 10, take you through the OUA schedule, and then take you around USports, talking about some of our favorite games in the three other conferences this week, and so much more. But first and foremost, Tom, coming in from sunny British Columbia. How the heck are you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing so well, my man. Being out here in Western Canada, specifically in BC, it's one of my favorite provinces to visit. I'm been out here for work first and foremost, but I did get a chance to extend my stay a little bit, so I will be in the house for UBC against Regina this Friday night, and I could not be more excited about it. I will also tell our listeners here, and especially the folks who are really interested in Can West, that I do also have a confirmation that I'm going to be hosting a podcast with the one and only Blake Nill. So that'll be coming out later on next week as well.
You tell him to keep his hands off our Ontario quarterbacks, okay, Tom? I'm trusting in you. So excited for all the content that you're going to be bringing us from being out there, talking with one of the legends of U Sports coaches and Coach Nill, and just for your experience at that game and what a game that looks to be. It's such a great Can West schedule as it's been all season long. We will get there because first, Tom, we got to talk about this U Sports Top 10. I have the right one in front of me this time. And it goes tied at 1 again, Laurier and Laval. Western in 3rd, Montreal in 4th, Saskatchewan in 5th, Regina in 6th, the St. Mary's Huskies in 7th, St. FX in 8th, and Queens and Guelph rounding out the top 10 in 9th and 10th. Also receiving votes is Ottawa, Bishops, and Calgary as far as teams that were relatively close in terms of 11, 12, and 13 to at least the lowest ranked team at 10, Guelph. Tom, there's been a lot of conversation about this, and we were talking going into our week 3 review podcast on how, with Queens especially, I don't care about the record because we've watched this team now for 3 weeks, and I'll certainly take them against Darney or anyone below them. And there's a lot of teams in front of them still I'll take them against. That Guelph team at 1 and 2, that I think is where we open up a little more suspicion. But I'll pass it over to you for your opening commentary on this top 10 with certainly won't be the last time I say this. I'm going to check the levels on my mic when I say this because it just it frustrates me that this has to be reiterated. Folks, this is not the standings. It's not. I know it breaks down like that a lot. But a lot of people I feel like are telling on themselves on their takes on top 10s on whether they actually watch the games or not. Mm-hmm. When their commentary reflects how things should be based on pure records. And I get it. If you are a better team, well, then why isn't your record better? Well, sometimes you play teams who are in that top 5, top 3 sometimes area of the U Sports top 10. The consummate conference champions and Vanier Cup participants. Okay? It's not the standings. I'm sure that won't be the last time I say that, Tom. What's your commentary seeing this top 10 come out?
Well, to be honest with you, first and foremost, completely agree. It is not the standings. It is purely a top 10 that is very subjective amongst coaches and the ELO system and all of that. Personally, for me, it is always, I think it's because I'm so used to seeing like the NCAA top 25. And with a lot of that, it's like perfect record, maybe one loss here or there or whatever, but that matters so much more. With only having, 27 teams across the country here, having a top 10 list is going to have a lot more variation in it, especially like you mentioned with a team like Guelph and Queens. The teams that they have lost to have been the literal best teams not just in the single conference, but according to this, in the top three for the entire country here. So, yeah, there's a lot of speculation back and forth about, who can be where or whatever. And I think Ottawa has a very legitimate claim to potentially be in that number 10 spot because I think even though the teams that they have won against haven't been of the same caliber as like the Westerns and Queens, obviously, I think they've looked a little better than Guelph has considering how things are going. But like, other than that, like, are you going to pick? If we're going through this and exactly like you're mentioning, if we're saying, oh, York should be in there. Well, I'm picking Queens and Guelph to beat York at this point in time. I'm picking Saint FX. Like it, all of that. As soon as you start getting into a 1 and 2 team and 1 and 2 teams in the top 10, what the hell? Well, put up everybody else against them and see who else you think is going to beat them.
And you and I have text receipts going back and forth over the weekend where I'm in agreement. The Ottawa piece, frankly, I have them in that top 10 over Guelph right now. It is to me a bit of a, if I get it, you have to only have 10 teams in there, but we have a tie at 1. In my eyes, it's essentially a tie at 10 with Ottawa and Guelph. And in large part because we're seeing that matchup this weekend from Guelph. So to me, that's in essence, the tie break in some ways. Again, depending on how it shakes out, there's still a chance that one of those teams walks out with an L, yet walks out with a higher confidence meter. Like it's just like that's how how the sport works so often. I mean, I even look at like with Calgary, UBC, and Manitoba. I mean, again, at a certain point, maybe this is really where we're getting to. I mean, as you referenced, they do the top 25 in college football in the States, in large part because there are so many good teams.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of getting to that point where we might now have to think about this in terms of just having it as a that top 15 or start off, maybe you call it a Big 12. I've heard that name used before, whatever it is. But as you've also highlighted, the top 10 or top whatever you want to call it, the rankings have no sway one way or the other than it's cannon fodder for good discourse. So on the one hand, I don't hate it. And again, I don't even know how that ELO thing works. And then you add in the media ranking and again, why we haven't got our invitation. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Have to assume so. Beyond me. I mean, I know when you click on the ELO thing, it does this fun little song and dance of like, well, what's the ELO? Well, it's the system that we use the algorithm to determine how good the teams are. Cool. How does it work? Well, it determines how good the teams are. Well, what does it do? Well, okay, you haven't really answered any of my questions. I'm not even going to pull up the actual language because it's not all that much more convoluted than that kind of silly rant I went on there. Mm-hmm. Tom, obviously seeing St. Mary's and St. FX in there is awesome. What St. Mary's did against that, Bishops in showing that with Shibley at quarterback, that they also have now an offense that complements that terrific defense, and in specific doing it against a Bishops team that ran the table last year in the AWS was awesome. And we've talked huge, big time accolades towards St. FX. And again, this is that situation where you just look at the talent on that team. They're undefeated right now, and you say, shoot, you got the 2-0 record, you got this terrific offense with veterans and MVPs and all sorts of, great stuff going on there. But then it's still like, well, you beat Acadia, you beat Mount Allison. So, I mean, again, we're waiting for that key game, and this week, I know there's a lot of Can West action we're excited for. That St. FX at Bishops game is like arguably like one of the most, well, I mean, there's Laval Montreal this weekend too. It's such a great weekend for football, man. I don't know what we're talking about. Tom, any other last thoughts about this top 10? It's again, at the end of the day, it makes for great conversation. It's somewhat contextualized the story of the USports year, but until we, maybe get to, maybe our OUA RCQ Super League or other versions in which we can maybe get more interconference matchups, it's always going to be a little bit of, as you said, just it doesn't make a big impact one way or the other.
Yeah, I feel like first and foremost, there is no impact that this top 10 list has on any standings, on any conference championships. It's not like, oh, well, Laval won last year, but like technically Laurier should be ranked number 1. Cool. They still won the national championship. So they are the better team, and that's how things work. It's just purely to have folks like you and I, and I'm sure a lot of other people across the country, just argue and complain and get us all fired up. It's essentially rage baiting. That's all this really is. And damn it if it doesn't work.
You know what? Honestly, what are our guys from Montreal, the fan club,
Les Montagnards.
les Montagnards? Je suis très désolé, mes amis, mais à ce moment dans la saison, I'm not even gonna bother. At this point in the season, I might have Sask ahead of them right now. Like they're looking so darn good, man. And again, I just man, there's a
Hey,
part of
there's
me.
a real legit claim to have Sask above Western right now.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that take either at all. I again, what a great top five that is. And we'll get into all these matchups and kind of maybe prognosticate what a win for certain teams across USports could do to this top 10 maybe at the end, or who knows, when we come into our week 4 review, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. But we can't get to the review before we take you through the slate of games we have scheduled for this weekend. And starting with the OUA, of course, we're kicking things off with the Battle of Waterloo, 1 p.m., Warrior Field. Waterloo quasi hosting Laurier, who's really hosting Waterloo. Tom, we got an email kind of clarifying how things we're going to go into. Folks probably don't care too much about the details, but like give us a little insight of what we learned as far as like how these two clubs, which again, I've said it before, like I do wish at times, like I love how well they work together and support Kitchener Waterloo football. Sometimes I feel like it's missing a little bit of, like, really stick it at your, opponent, really get at them or whatever. And probably a bit of a disparity of where those two teams are at the moment and for the last couple of years. But from this standpoint, I love it how they're collaborating, working together to put on as best a product as they can. Tom, what do we know about this event?
So this is essentially being treated like a stadium rental, like Waterloo would treat it as any other team coming in here. So everything from the webcast, the stats, all of that is being operated by Laurier and Laurier's staff. The only thing that's going to remain the same for a Waterloo home game is the fact that they have their locker room and they're still going to be on the home sidelines from that regard. Everything else, this is a Laurier home game. Laurier is actually asked it to be a purple out, encouraging all of their fans to come on, go to the Waterloo campus at Warrior Field and wear as much purple as possible to really bring that home team vibe. But it is a home game in every aspect other than actually being at the field.
Love it. And again, huge shout out to these two teams, to Coach Falds, Coach Bertoya, and just everyone who is a part of those organizations, the sports information people, for making that happen. And I really love it because, again, I love Kitchener Waterloo football and all the great things that they're doing there. Tom, I want to start off on the Laurier side of things because we brought this up on the week 3 review. Can't believe we're already talking week 4 here. We're darn near at the midway point of the season, but of how on the year so far, young Mr. Cal Wither in his first year at Laurier on the season is at just under 69% on his passing completion, averaging 247 yards per game, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, kind of that 2-to-1 ratio that he's been working on in his touchdown to interception ratio, the efficiency stat, which again, I still haven't figured out, but has him sitting second in the OUA to Scott Barnett. And we were talking on the week 3 preview of whether or not the version of Cal Wither that we've seen is a slightly more tamed version of what we might get in years to come when he doesn't have as stellar a cast around him. I'm sure Laurier is going to fill the coffers as best they can, but we recognize that the skill group right now at Laurier is a truly generational one, to state the least. But in that weird way, I was kind of posing to you this idea that I could see in years to come when it more becomes his team and less of the, hey, we just need you to make smart decisions, not, turn the ball over, take shots when you can, of just, for this year, just take care of the ball, make good decisions. But in years to come, we might see it where all of a sudden he's really popping off on those gaudy numbers. However, I'm sure there's going to be a few opportunities this season where he might have the chance to really show that, like, there's a reason that I made my way down south for a little bit before coming back. And we know that's not always the case, that means that you're of greater talent and whatnot. this feels like it could be that opportunity where we see, fourth game for him in of his OUA career of maybe having him pop off the purple out, whatever you want to call it, the homecoming game, the regional battle, all these types of things. What kind of game are you looking for from Cal? And what kind of game do you expect from Cal in terms of just how Laurier has been operating and just trying to, again, just kind of taking the whole thing into totality of just having him do the job they need him to do?
Well, I think first and foremost, the stats that we're seeing from Cal Wither is actually it doesn't tell the whole story, and actually could misstrew the story if anything, because like we've talked about, even in that last game, those two interceptions that he throws are not his fault whatsoever. It goes through a receiver's hands or something gets tipped at the line, and I believe that happened with his earlier interception as well. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but technically speaking, there's a world where he doesn't have any interceptions on the year so far, and those numbers suddenly look a whole lot better from that standpoint. From everything that I can see, obviously in our limited view of how things are going here, I think that Coach Galloway has been calling up relatively safe plays for him, not really asking him to say, okay, I need you to drop it in the breadbasket to Ethan Jordan on a 60-yard go ball or something along those lines. Like if you remember, Ethan Jordan scored a couple of times on just simple crossing routes where he's gotten the edge and taken off. You've had Laomi Ojatalayo on like a corner route towards the end zone where you saw yours truly celebrate with them a little bit. And I think from that standpoint, these are all good play calls, obviously, but he's not being asked to really take the top off at times. Where, like, there'd be a few times last year where Coach Stones Galloway's like, hey, it's 2nd and 10. Yeah, QB draw. Taylor, go get 10 yards. And a list of other things from that same standpoint. Now, we're seeing Cal continue to evolve and continue to get better and better at things as things are going. I mean, we saw his own version of that trying to truck somebody over in the end zone in the Windsor game. So I think that you're going to continually see him get better and better. And I think against a team like Waterloo, where K-Mac's going to dial up a bunch of different pressures, and there's going to be a bunch of different fronts and coverages that are going to be disguised and really force him to be on his feet. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit more of that potential of exactly what you were talking about in Cal this week to really showcase, hey, this is the quarterback that's here. He's got the arm talent, he's got the height and everything, but it's the work ethic that I think is really what's put him over the top, and that's why he went down to the States in the first place. And I wouldn't be surprised if we really see a big jump in this week in particular, going up against the K-Mac defense to really showcase, hey, I am this guy as well.
Well, and that's an interesting thing to think about specifically with the matchup with K-Mac's defense. And so far through the season, Waterloo defensively, oh, do I have the right one up here? Yeah, Waterloo defensively giving up 23 points per game, which is very respectable. And in terms of the rush yards per game is top 4 in terms of yards that other teams are netting on them. And we sometimes see that where one of those stats is skewed either high or low because of the other one where, well, yeah, teams aren't rushing on you, getting rushing yards because they just know that they can just get the ball out and have a day in the air or vice versa. Man, really good pass defense stats. That's just because they're running the heck out of the ball on you. In terms of the passing yards in the air, only 245 yards as well. Like this Waterloo defense, and again, we just went through that whole exercise of it's not just the wins and losses, it's the teams that you're playing and all these types of things. And Carleton, as we saw last week, didn't really pack their offense all that thoroughly to come to that game. But and they did a great job as like Waterloo has so far done perhaps the best job in 3 weeks defensively of slowing down UofT. So
the number one passing offense in the country right now. So
exactly. So with that in mind, Stones Galloway prepping for this one, his former, the former Guelph fraternity there. Like I love when we're getting these coordinator matchups we were talking about a couple weeks back, Grandy versus Nesbitt. And now we got Galley versus my guy K-Mac. Oh my gosh, the 10-year anniversary is happening and it makes me feel so great. Your Galley, is there a certain aspect of the game that you think that with what K-Mac has shown this year and with this iteration of Waterloo, of where he might be looking to attack? And we know Laurier has as well-rounded an offense as there really is in the OUA, but like as much as there was maybe some consternation of like losing Tanner Nelms and everything like that, and a lot of that was before realizing they were getting Quentin Scott back, like with the with the step that Tayshaun Jackson has taken forward, he's
Mhm.
still as good as ever as a returner, but I think just taking on more of the brunt of the load as that primary back. And then with Quentin Scott, like their rushing offense is so deadly right now. Again, it's remarkable how talented this team is. And with that offensive line, if you're Galloway, you're seeing what your guy in K-Mac's been dialing up on the other side. They clearly showed that against a pass-first defense, pass-first offense in UofT, that they can blanket it, they can slow it down, they might open up the box. They certainly can't do that against Waterloo or against Laurier, because if they do that, you know that Waterloo is going to rush for 300 at least on the ground. How do you mitigate that if you're K-Mac? But more importantly, I guess the question I'm asking is, if you're Galley, what's the plan of attack against a defense that's shown they can take away the passing game, but is not bad in limiting the run either?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to go up to your offensive line and say, we need a big week out of you. I mean, you talk about the guys like Michael Omaseni in that linebacking core, but let's not forget Dominique Walker, Marcus Ola, and the rest of that defensive line for Waterloo has been playing pretty good football. And even if they're not getting a ton of sacks on the board in the pass game, they are covering up gaps and they're being gap sound, at bare minimum allowing Omaseni to be in the backfield and just roaming around looking for the ball. So first and foremost, I'm going to that Laurier offensive line being like, you have to own this front seven. Because if I'm Coach Galloway, I'm looking at Keyshawn Bowen and I'm keying him because he's being asked to do a lot of things. He might blitz off the edge, especially if they start running the ball pretty effectively. And when that happens, that defense then has to make sure that they're covering up that gap. And so in the secondary, if he shoots off the edge, okay, well, now there's only so many things that we can do. If we send multiple guys, then we have to go into a cover zero look, and nobody wants to do cover zero against this Laurier receiving core. So if Keyshawn Bowen is coming, I look to see some kind of a game between like a match look essentially, or maybe a cover two or cover three look with a zone blitz happening from there. And if you're keying him, then that'll tell you what the rest of that defense, at least the defensive secondary, is doing in this one. So I think going into this game, regardless of the skill players that you have, if you're Laurier's offense, establishing the run, making sure that Quentin Scott and Tayshaun Jackson are being feared like the backs that they should be, allowing that box to get a lot more crowded, and then let Cal Wither just go to town.
And Tom, while you were saying that, I just had to pull up the stats. What's like kind of just blowing my mind, and Marcus Miller is another guy on that defensive front for Waterloo that's been really impressive for them. What's so interesting about this iteration of Laurier and the way they're attacking it is that right now they're sitting third in rushing, eighth in passing on the year. And it's not like they're playing schlubs. Like they went up against the Guelph team that, defensively we seem to have a few question marks about. Last week seemed to solidify a little bit. That Windsor team that, we're slowly learning a bit more about, but we know that defense is good. And then of course a Queens team with a really strong defense, and somehow they're putting up points, but doing it quietly, which is honestly the most terrifying bloody thing. And I think part of it is because that idea that we're keeping Cal Wither, it's like, like you don't bring the sports car out when it's still snowy and icy out there, keeping it in the garage a little bit longer, maybe take it around the block. You don't want to make sure that the engine's still good and everything. I'm talking as if I know a dang thing about cars. I do not. Let's flip the script, Tom. You highlighted the defense so adequately for Waterloo, and we can certainly talk more about it as we go on. Offensively, you were obviously really happy with what Emmett Ward did. And again, the numbers and the performance for a guy getting kind of thrown in the fire, first-year kid, is certainly admirable. For me, all that my concern about it was more of this kind of, Waterloo's still in this finding process where we thought they've solved the quarterback question a couple years ago and then not, and then maybe last year and then not. And so, but the idea and the Quentin Springer piece, which also got confirmation of, that he's gone from the team. We'll hope to try and follow up and see what more we can find out about that. But just from where we sit right now with this Waterloo offense, if Emmett Ward is your QB1 in this game, and who knows, maybe Nick Orr's back, but let's just say it's this kid in Emmett Ward or Nick Orr, Roy Vanderveen, Anthony Miller. Those are your running backs. Springer's gone. The small Waterloo Quentin Springer era, there's some great flashes of it. It's done. And then Evan Basiliga as that go-to target and safety blanket to allow guys like Marcus Hogel, Tyler Tierney, and Ramel Slocum as those receiver guys, those receiving threats. You know what? When you compare it to the team across the field from them, it's not as good, obviously, but that's a really solid core. But again, where the frustration comes from is that like it's like all well and good to say I like these names, we're seeing good things from all these type of things, but you need those reps, you need that consistency, and it's darn near as tough a task to find yourself as an offense against any defense as when you're facing Laurier. So that's difficult as well. What we're seeing from Waterloo offensively, from what we've seen from this defense in Laurier, what do you think Coach Conway's looking to attack? How do you think Coach Conway's looking to attack?
I think right now, when you look at this Laurier defense, you see a stout defensive line, you see some outstanding linebackers and DBs that love to come downhill and they love to hit. They're playing some really good football, and there's a reason why they're tied at number one here. But if I'm Waterloo going into this, first and foremost, if Nick Orr is not 100% healthy, I think Emmett Ward is your starter. I think he showed enough promise in that last game in the second half to say, hey, we're going to throw you into the fire here. Regardless of how that goes, you're going to get top quality opponents here to really, we'll test your mettle to see how well you do. And I think as it stands and as it's continued to be, I think the offensive game plan, at least in the passing game, has got to be find Evan Basiliga and get him the ball. Even though he's not going to be taking off down the field, he's not going to be outrunning guys, at bare minimum, being able to out jump or box out and just allowing that to be a solid catch down the field consistently, even if you're just doing it in chunk yardages, I think that's the way that you go. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if in that exact same iteration, we then see we've seen Jesse Wilkins-Flaherty playing a whole bunch, not just at Sam, but at that will linebacker spot, kind of flipping around depending on how things go. With a big body like Basiliga, I would not be surprised to see the lineup a little bit more in that Jesse Wilkins-Flaherty at that Sam linebacker traveling around with Basiliga. And now you've got Gregorczyk and Josh Connors in those two linebacker spots to really make sure that they're containing that run game. And I think having that balanced attack and trying to make sure that you're capitalizing on things. We've seen Josh Connor get in there in certain iterations, certainly, but if that's going to be the primary game plan to have Connors in there at that will linebacker, if nothing else, let's test them. Let's really see how good are you. Let's get some weak side runs with either with Roy Vanderveen, even just downhill, hitting the gap as hard as he can. And let's see what Josh Connors is made out of. Let's see what an AUS All-Star can do in this kind of game. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that. And I think Jesse Wilkins-Flaherty on Evan Basiliga is probably the best matchup that you can get, because you'll have guys like Jahari Hastings or anybody else who can certainly able to keep up with him speed-wise. But in terms of just that physicality that Basiliga brings in the big body, I think Jesse would do a great job in that. So that's kind of my thought process going into this Waterloo offense versus the Laurier defense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And as well, just the part of Ward facing this titanic defense and just saying, all right, kid, look, we know we're not putting you in the best possible situation right now. So just don't even sweat it. Just go out there and just ball and just let the chips fall where they may. And frankly, you know what? I'm going to walk back what I said earlier about Carleton not bringing their offense. Waterloo slowed them down. Like that was a Waterloo. Carleton came away with the win, but that was a Waterloo win in terms of what they did to that Carleton offense in their week 3 matchup. Tom, it's got to be Laurier, obviously, in this one. I don't have anything else to add into it. I'm excited to see if we see them allow Cal to take the top off a little bit and just kind of flex his muscles a little bit so he's not getting too itchy back there to have a big game. But so far the dude's undefeated in his OUA career. So what are you going to complain about realistically? But it's Laurier in this one.
Yeah, it's got to be Laurier in this one. There's a reason why they're tied at number one and one of the best teams in the country, period. But I am really interested to see this Waterloo squad go up against Laurier. You've played against some other teams and looked pretty solid throughout. You almost came back and beat a Carleton team that was much improved, obviously, from their week 1 showing. But I think we've said a lot of really great things about this Waterloo defense. This is your test. This is your litmus test. This is to see, okay, is that just you playing solid football against some other teams that might be struggling a little bit. I mean, certainly the UofT game, like that offense has shown what it can do, but this is one of the best teams in the country. How good are you? That's going to be my question.
Absolutely. Well, let's move from a 1 o'clock affair in Kitchener Waterloo to a 1 o'clock game kicking off from the Royal City, where Guelph is hosting the Ottawa GGs, a game that is not only has perhaps top 10 status on the line, but also has my heart on the line. The battle of my two favorite teams, of course, for different reasons. Tom, this was a huge playoff game we saw last year in the house. Obviously, bit of crappy weather in that, but where Ottawa nearly came up with, though we weren't terribly surprised that it was close, it certainly would have been an upset. And we have both these clubs in different positions. Ottawa coming off the loss in London, Guelph coming off the win in Windsor. And for Guelph, though it was ugly at times, we came out of that game still being like, we finally started to see some of those things we needed to. Donovan Malloy back in the backfield was huge for that offense as a whole. Aboud looked a little limited in his mobility, but, was still getting the ball out. Question marks with the receiving core. And defensively, starting to see some of those guys that we know can make big plays do so. And for Ottawa, 55-29 isn't great, but with the way they were moving the ball against that Western defense that is again, had to figure some stuff out, but is clearly getting better and has some incredible pieces there, was a day that, again, we can go through our text receipts of me being like, oh, I don't care about the final score. Ottawa to me is a top 10 team. We came out of week 3. Ottawa picked up a loss. Guelph picked up a win. But where was your confidence at with these two clubs in a win and a loss? Because again, I think this is an interesting case study of looking at two teams, one at 2-1, one at 1-2, one coming off their first win, one coming off the first loss. And again, this game is huge for just our understanding of not just where these two clubs are at, but I think it's going to help us recontextualize a lot of those teams that are around them as well.
Yeah, I'm really, really interested in this because this Guelph squad, I don't think is playing anywhere close to where you and I had them pegged in this kind of matchup. Now, certainly they're playing against top tier talent, and like we mentioned, that's why they still have a case to be in that top 10 list. But the execution pieces, the way that they lost against Western when we were in the house for that, like there's so many pieces in here that I'm now not as sure as I was going into this versus an Ottawa squad that, while the exact opposite of that, has not played against the same kind of caliber, at least for the most part. In a Western game, like they were right there with them for a good chunk of that game. And the thing that makes me the most nervous for Guelph fans in this one is in the past 3 games for each of these, Guelph has had abysmal starts and Ottawa has come off firing. Let's not forget, in 2 plays, Western scored scored a touchdown, and Ottawa marched the field and responded right away. And they've scored quickly in that first and second quarter, in that first half, and they've shown their offense and what they can do. If Ottawa gets up to a big enough lead in that first half because Guelph has started slow, I don't have a ton of confidence that they're just going to be able to roar back, especially with those receivers, those Guelph receivers who have not been playing their best. And now you're going to get up against Denny Ferdinand and Patrick Cumberbatch. Like, this could be a recipe for disaster for Guelph really quickly.
Yeah, like this is a game where, exactly as you said, with how we've seen Guelph struggle to get their offense going early and what we've seen from Jansen. And, again, those numbers for that Western game were really good. And somewhat having to, I guess, there is part of me where, because Ottawa was still going pedal to the metal offensively right to the bitter end, his final numbers of picking up, 31 for 42, 328, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, those are awesome numbers. If the game's staying a little tighter throughout, I don't know if he's able to get that because Western starts rotating a few of their guys. But just on the season as a whole, the guy is a few ticks below 70% completion percentage, 266 in his yards per game, 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. And yet I still feel, because putting that little asterisk against that game where, again, Western's going to their bench, they're rolling in some of their substitutes there, where I think he has better games in front of him. We still haven't really seen Charles Asselin pop off the way we know he does. And Is that partly the way teams are prepping for them? Has that then allowed for Noah Avery to really come on strong as one of the true dominant receivers in the OUA, a guy that's going to be in conversations as an OUA All-Star this year, undoubtedly? And then recognizing that what Romeo Lucier's been able to do for them, seeing Tristan Gilbert Thibault come off strong in the game against Western, and I'm forgetting one of the other receivers' names in the mix who was actually out against the Western in the Western game. But with a depth of talent there and an offense that's been getting up early, you're totally right that this could be a bit of a tricky an affair for them. And let's talk about actually though for Guelph offensively, like the scenario you were painting was, if they get behind and have to rely on the passing game, we know Aboud can do it, but does he have the weapons around them? This is going to be a really fascinating matchup in the trenches because we still know is maybe a too strong a word, but if we were going to bet on whether Mitch Stretchinger is playing in this game, I think the bet is that he's not playing. And against an Ottawa D-line that's been as strong as we've seen for them in years. And it's familiar faces in there, but whether it's just a product of being that much more veteran with Riley Hildebrand, again, another guy who won't be surprised if he's picking up an OUA All-Star nod, Louis Prince, who's having a really good year for them. And then, of course, with Daniel Briere and those linebackers and Jackson Brashear behind them, where with a banged up O-line, with a running a backfield with Donovan Malloy, who had a terrific game back for Windsor, but he's coming off injury. And we played around with the idea of, I wonder, was he complete? Was week 3 always the one that they were eyeballing? Was any part of them like, okay, we need all the weapons we can have. If he's at only 75%, suit him up and have him go in there. There's the part of me, too, that as terrifying as the prospect of playing from behind against this Ottawa team is, there's a part of me, too, where it's not a given that you can just run the ball against them. Now, obviously, Guelph being able to do everything means that, well, yeah, we can run it, we can play action off it, we can get the pass going. So it's not just like a zero-sum game of you either have to commit to the run or commit to the pass. But all the way of saying that this Ottawa defense and what they've been showing this year, it's not a given that, like in years past, to be able to say, yeah, that secondary scares the pants off me, but we can probably get it going on the ground pretty effectively.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at guys, and once again, it's why it's so important to actually watch these games rather than just looking at stats. But when you look at the domination that you've seen from Riley Hildebrand, consistently getting into backfields, and if he's going up against a second-year offensive lineman, Riley Brackenbury, for the Guelph Griffins, I mean, I think I'm taking Riley in that one, Hildebrand in that one, in order to beat this. And surely, I know that Coach Mike, obviously, you and I both know Coach Mike, and he's going to have some game plans going into this one, and we're going to be looking at Riley Hildebrand and how they can game plan against them and all of that. But Jackson Brashear playing some fantastic football as well right behind him. And so I think that for this Ottawa squad, I think the game plan going into this is, let's stop the run. Let's load up and stop the run and test these Guelph receivers and actually see if they can beat us in one-on-one coverage. Now, they might get burned a couple of times. Aboud might find somebody deep down, but I think that's going to be your best game plan going into this game.
Well, definitely. And just to speak to, again, the elevation of what Ottawa's been able to do in just their box play defensively, I just pulled it up quickly, and I know we were just saying about, it's beyond the stats, but sometimes there's certain statistics that do jump off a little bit. The past 2 seasons, Ottawa finished the year picking up 11 sacks as a team in total throughout the 8 games. And through 3 games of action, they're already at 7 sacks. So beyond just stopping the run, they're getting to the quarterback, which was something as well that we were seeing missing from this team. So that added element to me is really fascinating in looking at just how they're going to be able to attack this Guelph team. Now, we did talk about the Ottawa offense, that we're kind of waiting for that explosive day for them, and they've had really great moments and being able to move the ball and move it early and move it efficiently and kind of get all those pieces that they have in the mix. When we think about what Coach Barry's defense has been showing for Guelph, it kind of feels like it's reverting back to the year before Barry got in there, where teams are running on them a little bit more than we'd like. And that, of course, then trickles down into the secondary a little bit. For an Ottawa team where all those weapons that we already talked about, Charles Asselin and the versatility he brings, but then Suleiman Kamara as a young running back who's really becoming, I think, just like that. Again, as much as Aslan is perhaps the most talented, versatile, dangerous player there, when you can put him in those other positions, Kamara is kind of that number one back in a certain way. What do you feel like? How do you feel about the matchup in terms of the Ottawa rushing game with Guelph defensively from what we've seen so far this year and the sort of versatility that Ottawa can bring and how they attack on the ground?
Certainly, that's got to be a point of contention. That's got to be what Coach Barry is focusing on in this one. I mean, Suleiman Kamara has shown already some great flashes, but we know the capabilities that Charles Aslan has. And I know that if you start sleeping on King Charles, he's going to burn you pretty quick here. So I think he's going to his guys. I wouldn't be surprised, especially with how we saw how effective Soren Holschmidt was last week against this Ottawa O-line. I think Robert Keys Wilson is due to have a big game in this one as well, especially at that defensive end spot against these tackles. I think Nick Parchenko in the middle has got to have a big game because that's where a lot of those runs seem to be happening, right up the middle here. But with, guys like Eunice Larry in the back end as well to try to help slow up and just add into that defensive box for Guelph, I think they have the pieces there. It's just purely going to be how much are you willing to commit to the box? How well can your defensive line play? Because now if you can have your Sam linebacker outside of the box to worry about those outstanding receivers that we've seen and we know that they can go off, you leave Noah Avery one-on-one, chances are he's going to come down with the ball. If you can allow a double coverage there because you rely in your top 5, top 6 guys that are in the box in order to stop that run effectively, that's where Guelph is really going to come away with this one, in my opinion here. If you have to start committing extra guys in the box, have to send halfback pressures on the backside or something along those lines where you have now Josh Jansen looking at a one-on-one against any of his receivers, he's taking that shot no matter what. And obviously guys like Gianni Green or anybody else in that defensive secondary, like they're no slouches for sure, but this is a Guelph team that once again has seen so many injuries. Miles Lefoucauld just recently came back in that last game. I mean, we still haven't seen Demetrius Masuka suit up at all for this team as well. So there's still a lot of injuries that this Griffin squad has been dealing with. But I think as long as they can stop the run effectively and keep King Charles contained as best as they can, there's still a recipe to win in this game.
And I'm kind of hoping that in the same way that we saw Javon Jacobson really have, no, I don't want to say his first good game as if he wasn't doing positive things against Western or Laurier, but that, that kind of, playmaker type game, right? Of making a big impact. Nicholas Metron had a really strong game. Eunice Larry, as you mentioned as well. And then I still think about all these guys, and of course Anakin Guthrie, with a tremendous game against Windsor. And then I still look around, and yeah, you mentioned Lafoucauld. I mean, Evan Lakatos had a good opening week against Laurier, and it kind of fell off a little bit. Still waiting to see Braden McDougall have his real okay, there we go. There's 43 back in action as we know it. Simon Guerin at corner, and Nathan. It's a defense that, week after week, when I just look at the players that they have back there, I'm like, man, oh man, this team should be better than where they're at, and it might just be as simple as you mentioned, a little bit banged up, obviously losing key pieces, and we talked so much obviously about losing Anthony Mortuzo at that Sam position and how that affects your run, your pass, and that's huge. But as well, this is a team that lost Curtis Woodmansey on that front defensive line, that lost Tom, bail me out. The Josh Campbell, exactly. So not to take that for granted as far as that. So to your point of the Parchenkos, it's now is your time to maybe say that slow down the commentary from, folks like us of saying, that might be it. You lost those 2 starters in the middle, and it's hard for any team. And they kind of ran that 30 front, rotating those guys in at nose, having to change things up a little bit. Again, these are things that are difficult to mitigate, but they have the bodies in there. I mean, you mentioned Robert Keys Wilson and possibly having a breakout game, and we've seen Andre Thompson. At this point, the guy's pretty much an OUA veteran at this point, and what he's going to be able to possibly do against this Ottawa team. Tom, what other angles are you looking at this one? Because this is the one that I know where I'm going with my pick, but this is a very, very tight matchup. I mean, again, for to whatever credit you give to the top 10, the USports top 10, these are teams that are right on each other's corner.
Yeah, I have to be perfectly honest with you. Since the very end of that Guelph Windsor game on Saturday night, I have been mulling over this game in my head for the past 4 or 5 days. What do I really think here? Going over and really thinking about this, and I think that there's a ton of different ways that this Ottawa team could really showcase and be the better team in this one. I think that we haven't seen Josh Jansen really get back to form in that real outstanding showcase that we've seen from him in a few flashes from years prior. King Charles really hasn't come out of his shell as of yet. I mean, yes, on the ground, running the ball, he's dangerous, but in the passing game, like he's really been held in check for the most part here. And I think with that, that's allowed guys like Noah Avery, Romeo Lucier to really come out alive in the passing game. And so if Guelph walks into this being like, okay, we got to shut down these guys, these receivers on the outside here, that just opens up a lot of gaps in the middle. So I think the two biggest question marks that I have for this is what is Guelph's answer to King Charles and the rest of that run game going to be? Are you going to commit guys into the box? Or are you going to see what your top six kind of looks like to start with? And then offensively, well, receivers, how good are you? Because you're going up against two of the very best, at least on that boundary side. They're going to put you to the test. How well are you going to be able to get open? Because if you now leave Tristan Aboud with like 5 or 6 seconds trying to find somebody, Riley Hildebrandt is going to get in there.
And we've been loving what we've seen from Nicolas Dion at safety
Mhm.
for them. And you mentioned Jackson Brashear and Dejeuner Rondeau at, again, I think more of the will linebacker positions. Been having a really strong season as well. This is a really good GG's defense. We say it every bloody year with Coach Bose Audette calling this up. You know that they're in good hands, and this offense is perhaps as good as it's been. I am terrified of this one. And
Mhm.
this is one where, I mean, there's more commentary. There's more commentary where I'm taking Guelph at home, and there is the little bit that's also aspirational of being like, okay, let's show every level of the game because we've had questions about some of the special teams as well. And
Mhm.
when you got
Mhm.
Denny Ferdinand returning kicks for Ottawa, and you got Zachary Copeland as consistent as anyone kicking balls for them, you know that those special teams units are going to be good. So it's a scary proposition. There is a clear pathway for Ottawa to come in and, by the books, upset Guelph. I wouldn't call it an upset win. I was on the phone with a buddy of mine, a colleague of mine, who was asking, "What's your hot take?" Knowing that I was about to record, I'm like, less of a hot take, but for those who maybe don't realize how good Ottawa is, go ahead and say this is an upset alert. Ottawa can easily come into Guelph. Well, I won't say easily, but could very well come into Guelph and pick up the win. Guelph, we're kind of on, we're on that life preserver right now. You did what you needed to do against Windsor. You had to come back, which, gosh, why can't it ever be easy for us, man?
Mhm.
And we kept it alive. This Ottawa team with the at the 55 Bowl lingering and Queens coming to town not all that long after. Again, when you get behind the 8 ball 0-2 to start your season, I don't care how good those teams are. It makes every game that much more pressure filled. And this Ottawa team is so darn good. I'm sticking with Guelph, but much like calling the Windsor game, I don't love it, Tom, and it scares the heck out of me. What are you liking in this? Where are you going in this matchup?
Oh man, like I said, I've been mulling this over in my head so much. I think the final deciding factor is exactly like you said, because Ottawa has to travel to Guelph. I'm giving the edge to Guelph. I'm going with the Griffins in this one. If Guelph had to travel to Ottawa, man, I think I'd be swinging my vote exactly the opposite way. But because these teams are so close, I'm going to give that home field advantage. I'm going with Guelph. But like you said, I do not feel good about this.
No, not at all. And again, for folks that maybe think like, oh, really? Like Ottawa Guelph, guys, look back to that quarterfinal game in Guelph a year ago.
Hmm.
Ottawa was so, like, I- again, whatever happened with the weather, like that maybe favored Ottawa in some
Hmm.
way or the other, like, or maybe probably favored Guelph, and Ottawa was still, that close in being able to pick up the win. It's certainly going to be one of the games to watch on the weekend. But let's move into the final 1 o'clock game that we have slated, which is the Western Mustangs taking their show on the road to take on the Carleton Ravens, 1 o'clock in Ottawa. Tom, this is a game where I backtracked in the Waterloo conversation of saying, you know what, more credit to Waterloo in stopping Carleton. Because clearly we saw going back to that UofT game that once they figured out who should be starting at quarterback, their offense popped off. And that's a UofT defense that's not necessarily like a world beater.
Mhm.
But from what we've seen, I probably give Waterloo the nod defensively over them. When I look at this matchup against Western, obviously, we've talked about it a number of times, sort of referencing it in other capacities. That game when Carleton went to London last year and they go right behind the eight ball with that 14-0 lead, like, snap of your fingers, but they still put up the points. And a Western team this year who the offense looks like it's in darn near playoff form right now, but defensively they've had to find themselves. This one, I think, probably breaks out kind of similar to what Ottawa was able to do going on the road. More impressive, though it is, to be able to do that in London. But where, frankly, I think this is the game where a lot of people are going to come out of this being like, right, Elijah Barnes, probably in a losing effort, but dang, against a Western team that's getting better defensively, had a pretty darn strong game. I think there's going to be a lot of points in this one. I mean, I kind of spoiled it already, but it shouldn't be a surprise. I think Western's going into Carleton and picking up a win. No trouble there. But I'm not going to be surprised if Carleton can put up 24, 27. If they can break 30, I think that would be an outstanding game for them. Maybe I'll just be eating crow on this, or eating raven, I suppose, and Western will shut the door entirely. But this game just looks, smells, feels a lot like the Ottawa game last week, in that Western kind of has that arm out of like, okay, if we feel you're getting a little too close, we'll stick it out to make sure you don't get too close to us. But, it might become moments where it's a little bit shaky maybe earlier. I shouldn't say shaky, but where it's looking really impressive for Carleton, specifically on the offensive side of the ball.
If this was last year's Ravens, I'd have to agree with you, but I don't think it's going to be the case this year, my friend. I have not seen enough from this team, albeit, yes, you won a game against a Waterloo squad last week that we think a lot of their defense, and that certainly goes for something, but man, this is the Western Mustangs coming to town, and this is a defense that is established, and they are damn good, and I have not seen enough from this Carleton Raven offense. I haven't even really seen Elijah Barnes play his best game as of yet, unless you want to count like the second half of that UofT game. But I don't know. I genuinely don't know what I'm going to see from this Carleton Raven squad, and I know 100% what I'm going to see from this Western squad. And it could be something as simple as, okay, we've got our game plan going into this as the Ravens. We're going to do this. We're going to try to run the ball and things. Oh, it's 7-0 already. Oh, it's 14-0 already. It's 21-0 already, and we've had like 5 offensive snaps. We should probably get this thing going. It could get ugly really quickly here, and I want to see how much change did Carleton do in that bye week to go up against one of the best teams in the country here, because this, like I said, could get ugly very quickly.
And I'm not saying that's not going to be the case, and I probably worded it a little poorly. Like I'm not questioning that at all. In many ways, that frankly maybe sets the table that much more for Elijah to have an explosive game out of the necessity of it. Kind of similar we saw with Josh Jansen, just playing 4 full quarters as if, each play the Yates Cup is on the line for it, which just, it's a great philosophy to take, obviously. So from that standpoint, that's kind of where I see that happening. And I mean, maybe made that much more so if Western's able to, kind of get into their bench a little bit defensively. But with that in mind, if it does, come about that, it gets ugly early, as you were saying. And again, I can see that, totally see that happening. Western offensively really has just returned to that just dominant rushing attack and taking opportunistic shots, with Evan finding, the kind of go-to cast of characters. But we've been saying that, again, for where their aspirations lie, and there should lie, that we're probably needing to see a slightly more evolved form of this. The rushing attack's been really good, but we know that Western's had stronger rushing attacks that's been able to carry them to the pinnacle. Maybe this rushing attack gets there, but so far, whether it's in 2021, 2017, some of those other earlier iterations of it where their running game was able to be so dominant that it could truly, literally metaphorically carry them to the top. I don't think their rushing game is there from what we've seen thus far. It's obviously as good as we have in the OUA. We just know that there's years where it's that much better. And that raises the question of if this is an opportunity against, like whatever you want to say about how good Carleton is as a whole or how good their defense is, it's still an OUA team they're going up against with really strong pieces, whether it's L. James Agamuto out at corner, what we saw from Xavier Malone looking really good, whether it's Jake Henderson at the defense, I forget if he's half or corner. Some good pieces. Schneider K. Phillip, again, tough loss for them. Feels so bad for the kid. But just taking that all into consideration, if you're Western, are you just going by the normal script, or is this maybe where you want to start to open things up to maybe start to say, okay, this is the game where Dasani McIntosh really has a big outing. This is the game where maybe we start to use some of those counter tray read looks, getting the linebackers going east-west, and then there's receivers going across the middle, and Evans able to just, with that huge offensive line, just let all this develop and still sit clean back there and then take these shots? Or is it going to be more of just the classic script of, hey, long road trip out to Carleton. They're a bit of a wild card right now with just what we saw from them last year and what we're seeing so far this year. Let's just hand the ball off 40, 50 times, secure the win, and then we can start to kind of get a little more creative as the season goes on.
I mean, it's difficult because I see where you're coming from, and I do tend to agree with you in the terms of that like Western rushing attack. But they've still put up almost 780 yards of total rushing in 3 games here. So they are still doing some really great things. And I think that Ethan Dolby, 182 last week, like he's doing a lot of stuff on the ground as well. I am interested to see what's the continuation, what the focal point will be for this Western offense. I think going into this, it'd be very easy to be like, oh, I think we can take advantage of here. I think we can take advantage of here or whatever else. But I still think that the game plan will be establish the run, get Dolby, get Kelly, get them on the ball and get them running, and then allow Evan to do his thing, especially in a play action set where you've got guys crowding into the box, dump it over the middle to Braden Masseri, see Seth Robertson catch balls when he's completely covered off and should not be catching them. And then finally, like you mentioned, I would love to see Dasani McIntosh, Roman Campanaro be a little bit more involved in this passing game and really get a chance to showcase what they can do. Eventually, you're going to come against some teams that have got some outstanding defensive secondary, and if your only 2 guys that are really tried, tested, and true are Masseri and Robertson, you're going to get into some trouble really quickly with teams that can just double cover them and force you to go somewhere else. So I'm not saying that Campanaro and McIntosh aren't good. I think that they are very good. Anytime you've got anybody at any position starting on Western, you have to be of a certain caliber, but I'd just love to see them get a little bit more involved in that passing game and really get a chance to show out what they can do.
Totally. And that's kind of just where my point was really trying to allude to, if this is maybe that opportunity to do so, because again, I get the production's there. We're now slightly questioning what Guelph's rushing defense looks like. It's kind of one of those things where the more information we get as we proceed into the season, we can kind of retroactively go back and think about, well, does that change what we thought about things we saw earlier in the year? And obviously, we just talked really glowingly about Ottawa's defense, both defending the pass and defending the run. I just, we spend all that time looking at the top 10, and we're going to go around the league and the other USports games. And this is the part of me being like, again, Western, you can hate me for this. I don't know if the people inside that locker room would necessarily disagree, or at least like maybe some of the coaches disagreeing of like, okay, if we're going to think about like the Lauriers and the Lavals and the Montreals and the Saskatchewans, you can obviously, like, I'm not saying that they're not of that caliber at all, but it's like, I don't know if they've really shown that thing that makes them so special. And maybe it's just getting that, maybe it's just part of that, you take greatness for granted when you see it so consistently. And that's partly what makes them so truly great, is that they do it so consistently. And so maybe I'm falling prey to that the same way that, people eventually just want to just see the people who are perennially champions this is going to be the year they don't quite get it done. I realize they didn't get it done last year. I know who the Yates Cup champs are and everything. So maybe it's partly just that sort of bias playing in there of just like, because we see them so excellent, so consistently, I'm grading them against versions of themselves that is a certain standard that we don't do for other teams. But again, when you're Western, that is the standard, right? Is that greatness is expected and that should be what you achieve. What we haven't seen necessarily the best day from Carleton offensively. We were able to see a little bit more of that rushing attack come to life. Keyshawn Reed, a guy that we saw in instances last year, both as a returner and getting the ball. Joey Marcotte, Ethan Roca, kind of as this three-headed running backfield that they have, not knocking your socks off against Waterloo. And again, a Waterloo defense we really like. If you're Carleton offensively, kind of said that I think it could be explosive because they're going to probably be playing from behind, and that's sort of going to necessitate the need for Elijah to really spread it out, get the offense going that way. There may be part of the plan, though, is that like, hey, look, if it goes ugly at a certain point, we just need to make sure we can still run our offense in the totality of how we need to do so, to same way we're saying about Western, to kind of make sure the whole picture is as effective as possible. Which definitely means that even though it's probably not their best option, if they were just thinking, how do we move the ball so we can score points, possibly win the game, your best bet is probably just keeping the ball in Elijah's hands as much as you can. But there's the part of me too of recognizing, hey, look, even if they're coming out of this at 1-2, all losses are ultimately made the same way. The season is not lost by any means whatsoever for Carleton. But that, getting a fully developed offense is going to be what matters most. With that in mind, I guess ultimately what I want to throw your way with the Carleton standpoint offensively is, how do you mitigate the fact that, like, if you truly want to maybe have a shot in this game in, whatever many, universes it would take for Carleton to beat Western in this one, it's probably because of the passing game. But how much of the run game do you think they still need to commit to? Or are they just going to have to say, hey, look, we were great last year, barely handing the ball off. That's where we're going to really, great. They look great, the wins and losses, whatever. How much of the run game do you still want to see from them and thinking about developing the totality of the offense?
I think this is going to be one of those games where the pass sets up the run. And I think you have to go into this being like, if we have any chance of winning this game, it's going to be on the back of Elijah Barnes, but especially at the fact of it's a 1st and 10 or even like a 2nd and 8, 2nd and 7 kind of thing. That's where a handoff to Keyshawn Reed, Ethan Roca, Joey Marcotte could really come into play and get that Western defense off their heels a little bit, and just having to respect that run game as well. The big thing that I want Carleton to come into this with is having a right kind of mindset. So many times you see teams, especially teams that are good and that we think can compete with Western in years past, and they say, okay, we're gonna come out, we're gonna beat Western, we're gonna be this great team. And then exactly like I said, oh, Western just scored. You know what? It's fine. It's just 7 points. Oh, they scored again. They scored again, or they just held the ball for 6 minutes, drove the entire length of the field, and then punched it into the end zone. And that's where you can see that almost panic start to set in, where now let's get away from our game plan, let's throw the ball a lot, and now you're right into Western's clutches. What I want to see from this Carleton squad is that idea of, listen, Western's going to score. That's what they do. It's going to happen. How are you going to respond on top of that? What's our game plan going into this? Knowing that it very well could be 7-0, 14-0 at a certain point. Let's not freak out. Let's stay calm. Let's prepare for this, and let's see how we can respond. Because that's exactly what an Ottawa team did. You see a Western squad score right away, calm, cool, collected, go down the field, stay with your game plan, and score. Western scores again, same thing, same response. No sense of panic, just a sense of, we know what we're doing here. We plan for this. Let's go out and let's execute. I want to see the same thing from Carleton, because if they go into this being like, yeah, you know what, we really want to establish the run and we want to do a bunch of stuff, and then suddenly you start seeing 2 and out, 2 and out, 2 and out, because now they're throwing the ball way more than what they thought they were. Like I said, this is going to get ugly really quick.
Definitely. And the way you said using the pass to set up the run, I also, I need to see Elijah start to, like, get some of his ground game attack going a little bit. Cause so far on the year, that, half and change he played against UofT, and then last week, really haven't seen that. And maybe that's partly just the way that defenses are trying to mitigate what they know he can do. Not just if he's running the ball, but if he's escaping the pocket and can still keep his eyes downfield to maybe take a shot, because he's got a strong arm. Maybe that's part of it, but that's, to me, something that, again, just further unlocks the rushing attack and everything that they're doing with this one. again, hey, to our Western folks, again, we love y'all. I don't know how much more I really have that's overly productive to talk about on the Western standpoint in this matchup in specific. I mean, just the continued ascension of Elliott Blake is obviously a really
Mhm.
fascinating piece to be able to watch from that standpoint. Hey, love what we've been seeing from Ethan Martin and getting his sea legs back underneath him after, the almost 2 years off. Seeing old man Hallschmidt at defensive end looking like, partying like it's 2018 when I think he first arrived at Western, not too far from there. And, this is a great team. This is like, what do you want us to say about it? I mean, maybe it'll, the young guy and Jackson McKay, maybe he has a really explosive day. We've seen Richard Adu before make some kind of untimely and uncharacteristic errors early in the game. Like, maybe it's where he's due for a couple major plays. I don't really even know what else to say, Tom. I mean, taking Western on the road, I don't know what else you want to talk about with this team. It's they're great. They're awesome. You're Western. Yay, go you.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm taking Western in this one in a pick that surprises literally no one. Um, and I really want to see. I want to see what this Carleton team is made out of, because I want to see. There's two ways that this can go. We can start to see the leadership on the Carleton Ravens side, and hey, let's just the next play, regardless of what happens, next play, next play, next play. Let's make sure that we're focusing on that going forward. Or the other side of this, and this is not a prediction of Carleton, but just what I've seen in teams past who get down and can get down quick, of that turning on one another and that, hey, you should have been here, or I was over here. Or so, like, I hope that this is the team that's going to rally and going to continuously show and fight in that quarter, fourth quarter, regardless of what the score is. I want to see a Carleton Raven squad that's willing to fight and do everything they can in order to try to win and to turn this team around, because well, yes, you got a dub against the Waterloo squad. I need to see a whole lot more, because that loss in week one against Toronto still very much weighs on my mind. I need to see something from you, Ravens.
And it'll be interesting. Like, it would be great to know what the messaging is to this team of recognizing that, look, like, I don't know if you'd say it like we're probably coming out with an L, guys. I don't think you frame it like that. You frame it as being like we're giving our best effort, all these types of things. But like in recognizing that, like, at least as a coaching staff, of saying, what are we going to use to measure the success of this game? Because it obviously won't be in the fact that you're getting the win itself. But speaking of those UofT Blues, they are where we're taking our talents next, as they're hosting the Queens Golden Gales, 4 p.m. kickoff from Varsity Stadium. Where else would you want to be? Again, a rivalry that, if only because it spans a century or greater, the colors, the pageantry. Nate Hobbs used to always talk about, sometimes it's the matchup of the laundry on the field that just makes it so great. And varsity and the tricolors, it's a beautiful thing. Not quite as good if it's the nightcap, but you'll be able to maybe see the sunset as the game's coming into the second half and the fourth quarter. It's going to be an awesome time. This is the first real major test for this UofT offense that, as you said, with Scott Barnett, Jake Oseen, and Chris Joseph, has been the deadliest passing trio, and as a result, the deadliest passing attack in all of Canada, against a team in Queens that defensively is as stout as any other and has some guys in the back end that you can probably trust to be able to maybe not run step for step, because golly, is Chris Joseph a fast dude out there, but can do perhaps as best a job as anyone they faced to be able to mitigate that passing attack. All the while, though we loved what Waterloo was able to do with that front four and trying to get home when everyone else is just trying to blanket that offensive passing attack. And I'm going to keep giving you the credit for calling the shot on saying that Oliver Jackson was going to be the dude to watch and stepping up with those major losses they had on the D-line. Man, oh man, like, this is a team for Queens where I'm sure they'll dial up some pressure. Beckmanis is certainly going to get into his creative bag there, but where they can really just try to focus in on that passing attack and know that you still got the dogs up front, Stephen Capay, Eric Johnston, where that's going to be problematic. And this is where I'm so excited to see what UofT's counterpunch is, because frankly, as great as that passing attack has been, I think if they go into this thinking that we're just gonna keep doing the track meet thing. They have to show something else in this game. We started to see the run game come together against York. Jack Nyros had a great game, and that's awesome. How he does running it up against 44 in the middle for Queens. Don't know how that's gonna turn out for them. But I think this is gonna force that brain trust of the offensive minds at UofT to really show their hand of like, what's that next move that you have? Because I don't think what they've been doing as much success. And again, it's been so successful for them. Two overtime losses, again, being brutal. I don't think that's how they're going to ultimately, find their team success on this day. And I'll just say lastly, if they do, if the track show, the light show, whatever you want to call it, still is able to come out in full force in this game against Queens, I'm going to have to reevaluate so much stuff. I'm going to have to start putting, Jamie Cook for prime minister posters up around around the city of Toronto, just with what he's been doing with that passing attack. Obviously, shout out to Coach Kanichis as well. But what do you make it from that standpoint that UofT's probably going to have to show what that other move is, or else Queens, I think, with all the tape we have on UofT right now, can probably stifle this attack they've been doing that's been so terrific.
Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest matchup in my mind to really showcase UofT. How good is that passing attack really? Because let's not forget, against that Waterloo squad, as soon as in that second half, you saw what Waterloo did defensively, where they really kept the light box. They allowed Michael Omaseni to really stop whatever was going to happen there and dedicated extra guys out to the passing attack. This is a Queens squad that played essentially the entire game against McMaster in a 30 front and had those three D linemen eat up every one of those offensive linemen. You got Eric Johnston, Oliver Jackson, Stephen Capene. Like, those are top quality guys. And once again, we went into this being like, okay, surely Queens was going to have to step back in the D line, and they are still damn good across the board there. So you've got those three guys in front of guys like Justin Pace, and you're saying, oh yeah, like, we'll keep a nice light box. We'll let Pace do his thing and almost damn near single-handedly stop the run. And now you've got, even if you dedicated more guys into that box, you're still going up against Ian St. Arnaud, Keegan Vanek, Ashton Miller-Melanson. Like, it's not like when you get one-on-one coverage, it's just naturally going to be there. I think, once again, I talked about this in the previous game, this is a spot where like a Ashton Miller-Melanson is going to give a little bit of a cushion here on a Chris Joseph, on a Jake Oseen, and Scott Barnett's going to look over, and if he's not careful, yeah, he's going to try to throw that ball because that's what he's always done, and you're going to see Miller-Melanson not only tackle, but potentially even pick this ball off and take it the other way. You don't see Miller-Melanson until the last second, and guys who are covered by him are not actually open.
Yeah. And I love the idea of Queens almost just playing like that 30 front and then it just almost being just Pace behind there. He's like the shark in Jaws, just like wandering those waters, and I'm gonna eat up anyone who dares to step into my territory here. And yeah, what the secondary is doing, and again, we always got to make sure we're giving the shout out to what Jared Seaway does out there in that secondary as well, being so strong for them. It's really been so spectacular seeing how this defense, with everyone coming back and the system that we know is so strong, really takes shape. It's interesting thinking about what UofT looked like last year in the passing game, where after that opening week against Waterloo, and they're having this great day of Joseph with Oseen, and I guess it was Caleb O'Donohue in that one, but really getting that air attack going. And then the next week, I think they had one more, or the next one might have been the Guelph game, where Guelph was really able to shut them down. But you saw UofT go to a bit more of some quick balls, screens, getting out to their receivers, which wasn't terribly effective in that game, but is again one of those aspects that I don't know if we've really seen yet. Now, for what it's worth, I don't know how much I love that. I mean, obviously, these guys have the speed that if they can get open, some big things can happen. And I'm not really gonna judge one way or the other how good UofT's receivers are at stock blocking and getting out into space. I don't think I've seen enough to really judge it. I'm sure they're effective. What I do know is that Queen's secondary, as you already named off, will rally to the ball like a bunch of whatever analogy you want to use, and take whoever that is, take his top off. So that's a wrinkle that we've seen from them last year that I don't know if is going to be the one that we'll see in this one. And the rushing attacks and all that promising. I again, I've been pleasantly surprised with all the things I've seen from UofT this year. So I hate that all of a sudden I'm sounding like this major skeptic, but it's more just because I am super bought in on this Queens defense. Again, Save Me was saying but they just gave up 47 points. Yeah, to the team that's tied with Laval as the best team in all of Canada. Like, can we like save the commentary on that and like can actually like understand who they have back there and how they're playing? Let's flip the script a little bit. Queens offensively, we've really liked what we've been seeing with Alex Vreeken this year. Been really consistent getting the ball out to a host of guys. Jack Ashby-Jacobs, as we've talked about, having him healthy for that team has been so nice to see. Nathan Falcone as another veteran presence. Seeing the ascension of guys like Cedric Smith, having Matteo Tuioti, who we're week in week out being like, I'm this close to calling up Nezemil, say, come on, just do it for me. Get my guy like in the end zone. Get him going right now. Get the big guy rumbling there. And of course, Russell Weir, Matt Camillo, all these guys that they have, Logan Walton, all taking into consideration as well that they have at his best one of the best running backs in all of Canada, and Jared Kasari. Again, not to sort of undermine or to sort of look past what UofT can do defensively, because we know we love a lot of guys there with Ryan Stewart, Elia Linney, Brandon Thibodeau, Owen Casey. Certainly not a team that we're trying to overlook. But again, just based on the matchup, the advantage swings to Queens in terms of their offense versus UofT's defense. So I say all that and trying to ask you, similarly as we talked about with the Western team at Carleton. And to me, I don't think it's as big a disparity in this game as the one in that one. So I just want to make that clear. But in a game where you should have a number of advantages in a few aspects of the game, what are you looking to see from Queens at this point? Is it just like really getting the Jared Kasari game that whether they need it or not, it's just kind of fun for us as fans to see him put up, 160 plus and 2 touchdowns and a couple major runs and a few stiff arms? Is it just continuing to see this consistent, very highly productive play from Alex Vreeken, seeing who that next weapon is for them in this receiving carousel? That, again, going back to our comments of like, it's not the sexiest group of guys just in the names, because there's not necessarily that one guy you have to overly prepare for, but that doesn't matter because they have so many dudes. What is it you want to see from them offensively that whether we've seen it yet or we just want to see more of it, that you're looking to see when they take the trip to Toronto on Saturday?
We've seen Jared Kasari in the past. We've seen Ethan Roca. We've seen what they're able to really do in this, and I have total confidence in that Queens offensive line. What I want to see is the continued growth of Alex Vreeken in particular. I think that those receivers, like I mentioned last week, being in the house for Laurier Queens, which was still such an incredible experience, I got a firsthand chance to really see how good those receivers are. See Cedric Smith and see Tuioti and the rest of those guys, and really Preston Martin impressed the hell out of me. But a number of times, like I mentioned, I saw Alex Vreeken not have the best balls or throw them into the dirt or something along those lines. I want to see more consistency from him, because I think if this is a Queens team and that offense can really start firing on all cylinders, not that they haven't previously, but consistently do that, this is a spot where you can look at your outstanding defense on the other side and be like, you know what, guys, if you're having a rough time against Western, against Laurier down the line in the playoffs, we've got you here, and we can score at almost will. If you can get to that point, that is what I really feel is keeping Queens out of this conversation. Because like you mentioned in that last game against Laurier last week, let's not forget there's 14 of those points. That's a punt return touchdown and a pick six. And if those go away and Queens is in that, they are right neck and neck in that game going down the line there. So that Queens defense did an outstanding job against that Laurier offense as well. I need to see Alex Vreeken in that passing game continue to get better and better and really be the elite level that we think we can be.
I think that's a fair take. And yeah, like Ethan Dahl's had some good, I forget which thing, the first game that we saw from Queens against Western, really saw a good game from him. We haven't really even seen Isaiah Adams. I think he got a few carries against Maxwell, another really strong running back. But I take your point. I think ultimately just running their team through Vreeken is the key to success for them. Tom, I'm trying to think of really what else I want to discuss in this one. I guess the last piece that's less of a matchup aspect, but more a sort of not off the field per se, but more of a the mental standpoint of this is the reality of a U of T team coming off back-to-back heartbreaking losses. Overtime affairs, one against Waterloo and the other in the Battle of Toronto last week against York. And both what I want to ask you is just going into this matchup now off those games, and I was of just how that might affect their prep or just where their minds are at, but also realizing that, you know, you're a coin flip away, a jump ball play away from being 3-0 on the season. And does that change our impression of this game, or maybe what U of T approaches this game like, knowing that, like, sometimes saying, well, a 1-2 team, like, hey, could be 3-0 so easily. Like, I'm not going to say that about Guelph. Like, do I think they can play with Laurier and Western? Yes. I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, they're this close to being 3-0 in the season. No, that's not true. For U of T, it's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like they're trying to manage that piece? Is it just put it on the shelf, move past it, some version of that? And the fact that they could have so easily been going to this game at 3-0, does that change at all our conversation and our understanding of these two teams? Or have we seen enough to just kind of have for the conversation that we've had so far to kind of just be sort of fair regardless of what the record would have been?
Yeah, I think that this team is, like you mentioned, could very well have been 3-0 if not for some costly mistakes both on the field and off of it with some of the coaching calls, or what we perceive to be as coaching calls, because at the end of the day we're not in those huddles or anything else. But like, even if they are 3-0 going into this week, I don't know that that changes all that much in terms of what we think of both of these squads here. I think the strengths that U of T has are still going to be the strengths, regardless if they win those games or not. And really, what I'm most interested in here from a U of T offense against that Queens defense is that we know the matchups themselves, for the most part, Queens has you beat across the board here, just in terms of the individual matchups here. What I am interested in is that what we saw in that McMaster game against Queens, certain formations, certain rotations changed the layup of that, what that team looked like. And you saw a situation, I believe it was a quads look to the field, where Justin Pace is now acting as if he's the Sam linebacker and he's outside of the box. Now you got Jared Seaway in there, who used to be a former Will linebacker himself, coming in from that halfback spot. So, take with that as you will. But hey, now you're pulling the all-star, what we think is the best defensive candidate outside of the box. What can you do with something like that? How can you make sure that these guys are rotating over in the defensive secondary to potentially allow you some other opportunities? Do you just outright say, hey, you know what? We're going to go quads to one side. We're going to have the running back in the backfield for extra protection. And I'm going to throw a one-on-one ball to Jake Oseen or to Chris Joseph on the sidelines and just see who comes down with it, and to really just test what this team looks like. I think what we're really going to see from this U of T offense is plays with their formation to try and see what Queens is going to do to adapt to that and try to get favorable matchups in a certain spot. I think if you just walked into this being like, yeah, we're going to go into a standard ace 3x2 set to the strong side and just go head up against you guys, you're not going to win that battle. So how are you going to try to get guys out of place? Maybe you go trips into the boundary, try to pull somebody else out from there. Maybe you really try and test that 30 front and say, hey, you know what? We're going to try and run the ball here and see if you have to switch up into a 40 front or whatever the case. If you allow that Queens defense to just do their exact game plan as they planned it out, there's no chance you're going to win this game.
And I like that you brought up how Queens used pace to respond to some quads looks, because we have also seen, going back to Queens at Mac, them using some halfback overlooks, rotating Vanek down, rotating Miller Melanson to up top. We've seen having Ashton just chase a guy across the field, which again is just such a scary proposition that when prepping for this team, because so often you're doing those things, as you said, to then set up a certain play, oftentimes in the run, of recognizing, well, if they're bumping a linebacker out, how does that affect our count in the box and who we're blocking to, and do we have a more favorable matchup? when it's not reliable, and I'm sure Coach McManus has a rhyme and reason, multiple beyond between when they bump through the box and when they rotate through in the safety, or when, Ashton's just in chase. But when there's seemingly so many ways they're going to adjust and feel comfortable to, it's such a spectacular thing. Again, one of the reasons that Coach McManus is one of the best out there doing it. And when he's got guys like this to fill in, to be able to, put in place there, it makes for a very special team. A wrinkle that I think would be interesting to see is that, as much as I've objected to Scott Barnett just running into the heart of a defense when it's Michael Omaseni, let alone if it were Justin Pace, is to say, well, all right, well, if you're going to spread out the defense, try to maybe get Justin out of the box a little bit, or just see how they adjust, and you're clearly comfortable using Barnett, like, I wonder if we're going to get some read option looks with him to then theoretically eliminate another defender in a certain stance where you put him into a bit of a point of conflict. We certainly know Queens isn't shy in using those looks, or at least when they're going to try to put a Sam or a half in conflict with whether they're going to hop into the box or cover out wide to throw some of those screen games in. To me, that would be a fun wrinkle to see from UofT, starting to kind of truly connect the ground game that started to develop a little bit last week. That, though I didn't love it, Barnett did a great job rushing the ball against Waterloo when it was opened up for him with the obvious tremendous passing attack that they have there. I think that'll be an interesting wrinkle to see if that does come in. But again, I'm certainly not the offensive mind of Coach Kanichis and Coach Cook, and I'm sure whatever they're cooking up is as best as they can to pick up this win. But in my books, it ain't happening. It's Queens on the road in this one, Tom. I imagine you are aligned with me on that.
Yes, sir. Queens is definitely taking this one.
Well, that takes us to our final game of the OUA schedule, where we travel. We travel to the end of the 401 under the shadow of the Golden Arches. A little place called Little Rock. Wind City. The bluest of blue collars, the goldest of golden swaggers, under the guidance, the mentorship, the tutelage of Coach JP the Don Cercelli. The Windsor Lancers are playing host to your McMaster Marauders, coming off the Week 3 bye. Windsor, of course, coming off the home loss to Guelph, sticking them at 0-2 on the year, including that loss at Laurier in Week 2. Tom, I'm just going to throw it to you like this, keeping it nice and simple. We have a McMaster team that opens up their calendar against a York team that is maybe underwhelmed based on what we thought they could be. The defense has been so hurt, and I feel so bad for just like that team as a whole, that's what they're struggling with. What can you do? But they still have a great guy in Coach Knox calling it up, one of the best you can have there. And the offense still needs to figure it out a little bit, but we know that like they have all the pieces in place. Avante was banged up a little bit, but he was back last week against Toronto. That offense should be able to put up points with the best of them. So what am I saying? We saw Mac nearly take them out in that first game, and having us being like, man, your guy in LT, Luke Dahlman, is looking legit. They're running the ball a little bit. Jackson Taylor, dang, dude had a better game than we anticipated, at least that we thought we saw. We were expecting great things from him. And this Adam Grandy defense, to no surprise, based on what we think of him as a defensive coordinator, but golly, he's got these guys playing some great defense against a great offense. Then that Queens game happens. And obviously, we think higher of Queens than we do of York. But that offense kind of falls off a cliff. And we were just waxing poetic about how great that Queens defense is. So I'm not trying to contradict myself in that. And the defense, gives an adequate fight early on against Queens offensively. But we just kind of knew that, just like we talk with Western when it's a matchup that they're favored in, teams like Queens and Laurier, at a certain point, they'll just lean on you and lean on you and lean on you, and the dam broke, whatever metaphor analogy you want to use there. We've seen really good. We've seen some needing improvement from Mac, and they just come off the bye. Putting aside who they're facing, because obviously your plan of attack depends on who you're planning to attack. Mm-hmm. But from all the various things we've seen from Mac so far this year, and again, I'm still waiting for my number one Mac hater gear. Some really good stuff we've seen from Mac at times. What is it you're looking for your McMaster Marauder team this coming week? Firstly, without who they're playing, and then secondly, now taking into consideration they're taking on this Windsor Lancer team, how you think they're going to try to prepare for them.
Well, as it stands right now, I think everybody across the board, at least if you're watching this Mac team, you've got trust in that defense. I think all of the pieces that you've seen with the game plans, with the personnel that's there, I've got trust in that defense. Matter of fact, the only points that really get scored are two safeties that Queens lets up because you've got Horvat kicking beautiful punts out of bounds in those coffin corners, and then you have got a stout defense limiting Queens and what they want to do, so they have to give those up. I have to see something from this offense. I have to see it to see the domination that Queens had. And yes, that Queens defense is legit and they are one of the best in the country. We've said that a few times and I still would stay by that. But let's not forget Justin Pace is not being blocked consistently in the run game. Like when you have something like that, that's a big no-no. You have to block the best player on the field, especially when he's at middle linebacker. Like there's certain key issues that I saw in that Mac Queens game that I need to see cleaned up. Now I trust in Coach Hopkins. I trust obviously in Coach Potasic being the offensive minds that they are in order to look at this from a game plan perspective and look at this from a scheme perspective and be like, yeah, we got to clean up. We got to block the middle linebacker. I think they can master that. But this is a Windsor defense that has really showcased a lot of good things to me and certainly seems to be the strength of that team. I still think the world of Liam Hoskins and the rest of that defensive line in particular here. I think they're really going to try to get after Thalman as best they can, and especially watching what Queens did to them. Yeah, let's send seven. Let's get into a cover zero look and then pressure Thalman to make a bad decision like throwing a field out in that kind of a scenario for another pick six. Lord knows Robert Springer is chomping at the bit for a couple more interceptions back there. So I have to see some signs of life from this McMaster offense. And it just, yes, it could be from the run game. I think Braden Kelly, Micah Duchesne have started to do some good things, especially in that York game that we saw previously. But at the end of the day, this Canadian football, and as much as you want to run, even if you're the Western Mustangs, you have to have a passing attack in there. I need to see the growth of Luke Thalman. I need to see what the rest of that passing attack looks like. And Lord knows what we haven't seen yet that I would really love to see. Maybe, something else is going on, which is why we haven't. Let's get Nathan Denkers the football. Let's get him out in the flats and just say, hey, it's going to take you two guys to get him down because he's so damn big. Let's see what he can rumble out. Let's see if he can turn into a Tutiote or an Evan Basilica. But that's the big thing here. I need to see something from this McMaster offense.
And that's totally fair. But I think as well, if you're Mac, the way you're describing, Coach Pat Donovan maybe game plan this is saying, hey, look, let's get this kid uncomfortable and let's make him make some bad decisions and let's score some points defensively. Partly they're saying that because like this kind of feels like two teams that I'm putting Windsor ahead of where we have Mac right now, but feel very similar. Where I think if you're Grandy, you're thinking the same thing and looking at a guy in Domofsky and saying, okay, banged up. He's banged up last year. He showed some good things in his rookie year. Okay start to the season. And obviously we've seen him, hook up with Kareem Cott and this, fun new, toy he's got in his arsenal of weapons. Obviously Colby Ginn is that reliable, target that he's had. We've seen some good things from Tyreek Quason. But ultimately, yeah, knowing that you have guys like Robert Springer and with Ethan John in that secondary and Istvan Asibo-Dotsi, let's dial some stuff up and let's try to see if or pardon me, I'm making the case for Windsor. My apologies. But if you're Grandy, you got guys like Isaiah Shields, like Anthony Sestanovich, Big Tony in the middle, and then Zachary Payne, who's come on great this year for them. Just as far as being able to say, send some pressure and then rely on some of those guys in the back end. Carter Blad to be able to say like, all right, like I love when you point out they had him at safety. I'm thinking, hey, I love that just from the standpoint of like the talent that he has there, and also the bald head, big beard combo. I'm like that looks sick. And to say let him rally to the ball, make some big plays. I feel like it's a similar attack for both sides of the ball. It's saying, look, some offenses that have yet to really find their footing. I mean, I think we have more faith in Waby Mambo and that Windsor O-line and the rushing game as a totality of where where they're at than where Mac's at, but we haven't really seen it pop off this year yet. So I think there's some similarities from that standpoint that I think will make it interesting, because I think the exact case that you made for how Windsor's going to look at this game of saying, let's actually win it with our offense, because they might need those guys in the secondary like Springer, like Asibudasi, to make some plays, because they might be thinking, ugh, Domofsky might be under some pressure right now. How much production is he really going to get in this one?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The only issue that I really see here is that I really like this Windsor receiving squad. And Kareem Cotton really has showcased a lot of stuff, but Colby Ginn, I really think is that guy. And if you start setting a lot of pressure at Domofsky, even if he has to just throw up a quick prayer, if one of those guys catches it with some space, I think they could really burn you here. But I still think that that is the right call, especially with how we've seen Domofsky really hasn't had a solid game. We haven't really seen him play like he's played previously here. So I'm going to continue, if I'm that Mac defense, yeah, let's continue pressuring him. Let's see Malik Bolt get off the edge, and let's see him really try to get into Domofsky's face and try to get him uncomfortable. But Lord knows, when you look at this from a Windsor standpoint, you're handing the ball to Mombo and you're handing the ball to Delaney and saying, let's get a run game established in this one, because that's where Windsor's offense has been the best over the past few years. Establishing the run, making sure that teams are aware of it and having to look at stopping it, and then having Domofsky say, hey, you've got 7 guys that are committed into the box, even with a halfback who's got their eyes peeking into the backfield. Now let's have you throw the ball, because previously so far, we've seen Laurier and we've seen Guelph limit that run game pretty effectively here. Now, Mumbo and Delaney are still outstanding athletes, especially after having watched them myself live against Laurier. But I have to imagine that that's going to be the game plan. Get those guys going, get that run game back to where we think Windsor run game can be, and then allow Domofsky to sit back and start throwing balls.
I think I think that makes all the sense in the world. I love that you brought up Malik Bolt. I think for Greg Palmer, this is going to be a lot on his shoulders to make sure that, to your point, if they have to over support in their run defense, and we know Grandy's going to dial up some blitzes, like definitely going to see it just as a product of like who he is as a coordinator, let alone how they want to scheme it up. But if Bolt and Palmer can really do a good job of not making Tony Sestanovic and Shields commit too hard into the run, then that's going to go a long way for them in that regard. Looking at this Windsor attack, and I still haven't, again, hey, Mr. Ian Talbot, you still have my phone number. I'd love to know what's going on with your boy Liam, right? Shout out to Zach and Brendan, but we know that like of the 3 right now, we want to see 21 for Windsor. That to me is as important as anything else, because I think that everything that you kind of described tracks perfectly. I think there's a chance that we're getting on the week 4 review podcast and you're like, I hate that it happened against my Marauders, but I kind of told you so. They established the run. They were able to make some easier looks for Domofsky. He's able to get his mojo going, and then we're hitting Cotton, we're hitting Colby Ginn, and we're hitting Tari Quason, and we're having a really productive offensive day, and it starts with the defense. There's a version of it, though, where we get Liam Talbot back in here, and all of a sudden we're seeing not just what this Windsor team can look like when starting with that defense to the run to the pass looks like, but having an X factor like that, adding into the mix is what might make them a team where, as we're approaching the midway season and they have 1 fewer games than, them and Mac will play the same games, but a number of these teams having played going into their 4th game, whereas Windsor and Mac are going into their 3rd, getting to that point where, 0-2 on the season. We know it's a young quarterback. You highlighted perfectly, though, how good a weaponry he has around him. I'm going to keep hammering home on this until I know for sure if we're, knock on wood, that we're just not seeing him, if we're not seeing him back. But that prospect of Talbot with this offense and to make Domofsky that much more comfortable creates a version of this Windsor team that we had them in that something to prove territory where I could see them getting quickly in that spot where Ottawa is a little bit of saying, man, if you can find a little more consistency offensively and get 21 back in there for them with the way this defense can ball out with those guys they have. And we know Malik George wasn't playing against Guelph, that much more bolstering the front line. Windsor's, let's not sleep on Windsor. That's all I want to say. Like, we haven't seen enough from them to really say that they're that kind of sleeper team, not to necessarily make a run by any means, but maybe be that team, just again, in the auto comparison, that can go on the road and scare a team like Guelph or maybe like Queens in the early throws of a game and whatnot. But to me, it comes back to 21 in the mix. But I think that creates a possibility where this Windsor team could be special this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Liam Talbot brings such an amazing array of possibilities to that offense. As soon as he touches the field, you can treat him like a running back and hand off the ball. You can get him on a jet sweep. You can just throw them the ball in space, and that just allows so much more for not only Nick Domofsky, but it allows, it makes another defense have to worry about where's Liam Talbot at any given second. Because he could line up in the backfield. He could be one of the slots. He could put him out at one of the either X or Z receivers. So there's a lot of different capabilities that he's able to do. What I'm in the best case scenario for my Marauders in this one, I think going into this, it wouldn't be a stretch to say I think that Mac defense is going to create some problems for a Windsor offense. I don't think I've seen this Windsor team really come off and really do enough offensively yet to warrant, okay, this is the high flying offense just as of yet. If that Mac offense can get something going and can put together a drive, can get a score, can do something, I think that Mac defense allowing for the fact of, hey, we're up something now. Now we can play a little bit more reserved, or now we can be a little bit more aggressive in certain cases and just allow them to do a little bit more. I think that could do something for them. But to be perfectly honest with you, man, I have not seen enough from this Mac offense. Yes, they did a lot of really good things against that York team, but the more things have been going on, and maybe this is just the hater in me, I am not impressed with that York team as a whole as much as I thought I would be going into the season here. So it almost diminishes what we saw in that game. I have to see something from that Mac offense. Every single person that has seen me since that Mac Queens game has looked at me, been, ugh, that Mac offense, eh? That's not good for your boys. I have to agree with them. So I need to see something from this Mac offense. I have total faith in the special teams. I have total faith in that defense. But if it's just two out of the three or the 2 out of 3 formations, coordinators, whatever, that are firing on all cylinders, you're going to lose every game that you're going up against. I need to see something from this MAC team, and traveling down to Win City for a 7 p.m. game is probably not the most ideal setting to see an offense come alive.
And I don't think we really mentioned Liam Hoskins too, as just that offensive line again has made big strides for them. That guy presents a problem. And in addition to that, though he's a first-year kid, I really like what we're starting to see. Had a bit of a quieter game against Guelph. Liked him much more in the Laurier game. But Marco Piccioni filling in the middle for them. Young guy out of the Royal City. Again, thinking about how well they've been able to just backfill some of these key players that they've lost over the years. Be interesting to see how his development continues. I don't have any more to really comment on this one. I think it'll be a good defensive battle, and it's really going to be able to say who can make the other offense that much more uncomfortable and making maybe a few key mistakes. And depending on who we see show up on offense for Windsor come those warm-ups, again, will very much dictate my thought on just where this game's at. But whether Talbot's on the field or not, well, we know there'll be some Talbots on the field, Liam Talbot in specific. I'm still taking Windsor at home in this one, but I'm still excited to see a lot of those positive pieces for Mac, because I've said it before, I'll say it again, with a lot of what's in place, a relatively new coordinator on defense this year and an offensive coordinator in his second year and changing quarterbacks. I think there's a lot of promise for next year with this Mac team, so I'm still looking to see those things that speak to where the future's going for them, but on this day, it's Windsor at home.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I have not seen enough from this McMaster team to really say, hey, this is where they're going to place yet, or this is where they're going to go. And very, very happy to be proven wrong here, Mac fans. Please, I'm very happy to be. But I need to see the growth and the development of the rest of this team here. You just got into a bye week. Probably the best time, especially after having a bad loss against Queens, that gives you a time, A, to revamp and rethink things and how you're going to attack, and B, in a best case, You just sit in that loss, and it was a bad loss against Queens, and that's all you're thinking about as you go into prepping against Windsor. So, if anything, I'm hoping that that gives you a little bit of extra oomph to get you motivated and everything else. But I think it's Windsor taking this one at home.
That is a wrap on our week 4 preview of the OUA. But let's now take you around the league looking at the full slate of games across U Sports. And it starts on a Friday night out of Quebec, where for the first time this year, we're getting Laval at Montreal, 7 p.m. kickoff. But the night doesn't end there because we also get the Battle of Alberta, Calgary at Alberta, and Regina traveling to UBC in another colossal Can West matchup. On the Saturday, we get Acadia traveling to Mount Allison for a 2 p.m. start. St. FX at Bishops. I'm going to talk about that one soon. I already mentioned how excited I am for that one. 1 p.m. start. We all have Saskatchewan going to Manitoba, which again, look past the records. That is an outstanding game. And the U Sports calendar wraps up with Concordia going to Sherbrooke. Tom, thus far, when we do these around the league things, I ask you for the one game you're most excited for. At this point, that's a frivolous exercise. What games are you most excited for in this one, Tom? Because I know it would be a fool's errand to try to restrict you or myself to only highlight one apiece because there's so many good games here.
I would challenge, is there a potential better atmosphere, maybe at the other opponent's field, but Friday night, Laval at Montreal. Are you kidding me? What an electric atmosphere that is going to be. I know that our friends at Les Montagnards will be out in full support for their Blues, but man, if there's one thing that I know from my time at McMaster, Laval fans travel, and I know that they'll be there in full force as well, so have to see what that looks like. But certainly with the growth and the production of what that Laval offense and that Laval team just kind of looks like, I think everybody across the country is going to be thinking it's going to be Laval taking this one. To be honest with you, when you just look at the storylines and when you look at things here, I think we're looking to the AUS. I really do. I think that St. FX and Bishop game is really interesting to me because I want to see, hey, was that win that St. Mary's had against Bishops, was that just a fluke? Did Bishops really just not come out with a proper game plan? How good is this St. FX team? And I think that's going to be the one to really watch, especially with what the future of the AUS looks like. But I have to say, I am so damn excited to see my first live Can West action this week when Regina travels to UBC. I'm a kid in the candy shop this week, Zach. There's so many amazing games across the country.
Well, and let's stick with the Can West aspect of it, because I mean, this is the thing that's so spectacular about that conference is that, we get this matchup, as you're saying, with UBC and Regina, where right now Regina sits atop Can West and what Noah Pelletier is doing and all that, so fantastic what they're doing, that defense that really is what allowed them to go on that Hardy Cup run last year and nearly knock out Laval. Now seeing the offense, kind of similar with what we talked about with St. Mary's, the offense starting to match them that much more. But 2-0 against the team in UBC at 1-1. And not that that's a major jump, but anyone's game. The same way that we have Saskatchewan and Manitoba, 2-0, and arguably in Saskatchewan as good as anyone's looking, versus an 0-2 team in Manitoba. And I'm probably picking Saskatchewan, but to me, that's not like a no-brainer pick. And then Battle of Alberta, I mean, Calgary's been in perhaps some of the most electric finishes that we've seen this year, and Alberta at that 0-2 record showing some incredible promise early on. I mean, you can't go wrong wherever you're tuning in with these games. And just to go back quickly to the Montreal Laval game, and I want to throw you more of a direct question here, which is just to say, and again to our friends at Le Montagnard, allez les bleus, allez les bleus. We obviously saw the freshman, and I mean, I'm never going to get tired of saying the name, and Pepe Gonzalez have a terrific game for them. And right now, he's got 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, averaging 232 yards per game. I mean, the yards per game are kind of not the best metric in looking at what he's done, along with Rakeem Canales-Charles. But it looked like Rakeem was the de facto starter coming into it. Pepe, based on the production, seems like he's the guy. I'm assuming he's the one trotting out for them based on like, and I want you to bring up what our friends at Le Montagnard let us know about how we can, maybe not live, but after the fact, tune in these TVA games without being able to watch them, but just sort of tracking what they've been doing so far in this post Jonathan Senecal era. Does it seem like Pepe's won it? Do you think they're maybe going still a bit back and forth? It's also the fact that, Gonzalez is a freshman, Canal Charles is a junior. That might play into the decision. Do you know anything more about that matchup right now and what they're planning to do? Obviously, that defense is still strong as all heck, but obviously you got to figure out who your quarterback's going to be. And this defense against Laval isn't the best like case study in being able to say, oh, okay, we'll be able to maybe have them go back and forth. It's arguably the best defense in the country.
Yeah, I think that I don't have any insider information on who is going to be the guy for Montreal as of yet, but what I'm hoping for Coach Marco Idaluca and the rest of that staff is that they know who their guy is. Because if you go up against a team like Laval, being like, "Yeah, we'll try out Pepe to start, and then if we have to go, we'll switch him out at halftime or something," that doesn't do anybody any favors. And like you and I have known, there has never been a successful two quarterback system where you're subbing in guys like that unless it's in certain packages. And even then, it's not the best look, in my opinion. So I want to see Montreal come out with a hard set. This is our guy. Pepe's the guy. Let's get him started. Let's get him going because this is a Laval squad. And Arnaud Desjardins playing some of his best football that he's played so far, which is a scary thought knowing that he's already won a Heck Crichton and a couple of Vaniers. And Olivier Cool, who only seems to get better and better as things go on. And an offensive and defensive line that look unbelievable and are young for a Laval squad. And that's terrifying. You know that they're going to move the ball. Bare minimum, they're going to put up some points, whether that's three or it's seven, and you have to have a response ready to go. Now, the fact that the first time you're playing against them is in Montreal, it certainly goes a long way. Those fans, especially with the tunnel or the roof that's over top of those fans, it gets loud as all hell, and those 5,000 start feeling like 10 or 15 pretty quick. But this is a Laval squad that plays in front of 20,000 pretty much every day. I don't think they're going to be too frightened by that, but I need to see what Montreal has. This is the biggest test to see where are you right now.
And just taking it back out east, obviously, I love that you set up the Saint FX Bishops game. Justin Quirion versus Salas Fagnon, Malcolm Bussey, Fogarty in the backfield, Harrington, Zachary Hood, Bishop's defense that obviously showed a little blip on the radar. How much of it was St. Mary's with Shipley really giving them a big boost offensively, and how much of it is maybe is Bishop's defense a bit weakened from what we saw last year? I'm also really interested to see what we see out of Acadia and Mount Allison, because both these teams so far have just fallen victim to the fact that there is a clear hierarchy in the AUS of, though it's still kind of taking shape, and though at time, at this stage right now, though it's St. Mary's, Saint FX Bishops, or I forget exactly how it's listed, I don't know if we know enough, even despite how big a beatdown that was by St. Mary's, to truly say that like one of those teams is triumphant. But at the end of the day, one of these two teams in Acadia and Mount Allison are still going to make the playoffs. And, from what we've seen against these other opponents, they've both just had to lick their wounds facing those top three teams. This is that game, and they'll obviously, I think they get another shot at one another later in the season, where it'll be fascinating to see who's going to be in that position to be able to fight for that last playoff spot. But I mean, at the end of the day, for AUS football, it's the Saint FX, it's that Bishops game that's going to be so incredible. Tom, final thoughts on this USports calendar that we have coming up for week 4, week 3 if you're in Can West.
This is one of the few times, and I know obviously we are OUA biased in that that's where our home is. That's where the conference that we say. This is one of the few times where I'm actually looking to the other conferences going, I think you've got the best games of the week going into this one. Certainly, there is no doubt in the RSEQ. There is no better game to really watch there. And I will absolutely be rewatching that once it gets posted onto YouTube by whoever's doing that. Mwah, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup in order to be to watch that. And like I mentioned, I am legitimately so excited to watch a UBC team up front in person. We saw Drew Viotto really do his thing in his first game, and then that offense really came to a halt against an outstanding Saskatchewan defense, Seth Hundeby, Carson Sumbach, and the rest of those guys here. Said how much of that is just Saskatchewan being that good versus UBC struggling. And when you see a team like Regina that's got Marshall Erickson, who's one of the best running backs as well, seeing how well our guy in Kinsale Phillip at that will linebacker spot can enter into the box and try to tackle a big dude like that. I am so incredibly excited for this week of football, as I always am, but there's just an extra bit of oomph from the rest of the country as well.
It's a great time to be a USports football fan. And Tom, while you're going to be out taking in all the glory of CanWest football, I'm going to be taking in another celebration, which is the marriage of our good friend and business partner in Dakota Vine, tying the knot. And so let this be the first and probably not last shout out, because I'll probably do another one on the review pod, to our man in the chair doing all the wacky and wild things he does on social media, the meme god himself, Dakota Vine. Love you, my friend. This will be the real test if you're listening all the way through on these podcasts. If I don't get a text from you on this, Dakota, we're done. We're done, brother. No, what a great weekend of USports football. Can't wait to be watching it all after the fact, after I spend all Saturday partying it up with the Vines. Tom, outstanding job by you. I'm so happy you're getting to take in this game from UBC, and no doubt manically following all the OUA, RSEQ, and AUS football from your phone and after the fact while that's going on. I can't wait to be breaking it down with you on Sunday, bringing you the review pod as we're nearing the halfway mark of the season, which is redonkulous to think about. Makes us have to enjoy it that much more. But we'll be breaking down this week later on right here at the 55.